There's a moment right before you step into the light, that exact second when your name is called, when the room turns toward you, when silence wraps around your throat like a hand. Your heart pounds so loud, you wonder if the microphone will pick it up. Your palms are wet. Your mind goes blank. And in that frozen instant, you have a choice. You can let fear win, or you can take one step forward and speak anyway. Most people believe public speaking is a talent, something you're born with, a gift reserved for the charismatic, the naturally confident, the ones who seem to own every room they enter. But here's the truth that no one tells you. Every great speaker you've ever admired was once terrified. Every captivating voice you've heard was once shaky, uncertain, and convinced they had nothing worth saying. The difference between them and everyone else isn't talent. It's the decision to speak despite the fear. And that decision, that skill, can be learned by anyone willing to try. Public speaking isn't just about standing on a stage. It's about being heard when it matters. It's about sharing an idea in a meeting without your voice trembling. It's about proposing a toast at a wedding without wanting to disappear. It's about defending your work, inspiring your team, or simply introducing yourself with clarity and presence. These moments shape careers, relationships, and the trajectory of your life. And yet most people would rather do almost anything than speak in front of others. Studies have shown that the fear of public speaking ranks higher than the fear of death for many people. Think about that. We'd rather cease to exist than be judged while holding a microphone. But this fear isn't a flaw. It's not weakness. It's biology. Your brain evolved to keep you safe. And for thousands of years, being rejected by your tribe meant death. So when you stand in front of a group, your ancient brain screams danger. It floods your system with adrenaline. It makes you want to run. This response kept your ancestors alive. But in a conference room or on a stage, it just makes you sweat and forget your opening line. The good news is this. Once you understand fear, you can work with it. Once you see it as a signal rather than a sentence, you can transform it into fuel. And that's what we're going to explore together. Not how to eliminate fear, because you can't, but how to speak with confidence anyway. How to command a room, even when your hands are shaking. How to connect with an audience so deeply that they forget to judge you and instead lean in to listen. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming the most authentic, powerful version of yourself. And it starts with understanding what's really happening inside you when fear takes over. Now imagine you're sitting in a meeting. Someone asks for volunteers to present next quarter's strategy. The room goes silent. Everyone suddenly finds their notebooks fascinating. You feel the idea rising in your chest, the one you've been working on for weeks. You know it's good. You know it could change things. But then the fear kicks in. What if they don't like it? What if you stumble over your words? What if someone asks a question you can't answer? So you stay quiet. You let the moment pass. And later, you watch someone else present a version of your idea. And you wonder why you didn't speak up. This pattern repeats everywhere. In classrooms where brilliant students never raise their hands. In boardrooms where valuable perspectives stay buried. In social settings where people remain invisible because they're too afraid to contribute. The cost of silence isn't just professional. It's personal. Every time you choose not to speak, you reinforce the belief that your voice doesn't matter. You teach yourself to stay small. And over time, that becomes your identity. Stage fear, or what psychologists call speech anxiety, operates on multiple levels. There's the physical response. Increased heart rate, shallow breathing, dry mouth, trembling hands. The sensation of butterflies multiplying in your stomach. Then there's the cognitive component. Racing thoughts, mental blanks, catastrophic predictions about what will go wrong. And finally, there's the emotional layer. Shame, embarrassment, the crushing weight of potential judgment. All of these systems activate simultaneously, creating a perfect storm of discomfort. But here's what most people misunderstand. They think the goal is to stop feeling these sensations. They believe confident speakers don't experience fear. That's completely false. Professional actors, seasoned politicians, veteran teachers, they all feel nervousness before performing. The difference is they've learned not to interpret those feelings as a stop sign. They've trained themselves to recognize physiological arousal as preparation, not panic. their hearts race too. But they've reframed that racing heart as excitement, as energy, as readiness. The transformation begins with a single insight. Fear and excitement are chemically identical. Both release adrenaline. Both heighten your senses. Both prepare your body for action. The only difference is the story you tell yourself about what's happening. When you label those sensations as fear, you want to escape. When you label them as excitement, you lean in. This isn't just positive thinking. It's a neurological hack. Research in psychology has demonstrated that people who reframe anxiety as excitement perform better under pressure. They speak more fluently, think more clearly, and connect more authentically with their audience. So the first step to defeating stage fear isn't to breathe it away or meditate it into submission. It's to change your relationship with the sensation itself. Next time you feel that surge of adrenaline before speaking, don't fight it. Welcome it. Say to yourself, "This is my body preparing me to be excellent. This energy is here to help me." It sounds simple, almost too simple. But this cognitive shift is the foundation. Everything else builds on. Because once you stop treating fear as the enemy, you free up enormous mental resources to focus on what actually matters: your message and your audience. Most beginner speakers make a critical mistake. They think public speaking is about them, about how they look, how they sound, whether they'll mess up, whether people will judge them. This self-focus creates a vicious cycle. The more you think about yourself, the more nervous you become. The more nervous you become, the more you monitor yourself for signs of failure. And the more you monitor yourself, the less present you are with your audience. It's mental quicksand. The escape route is radical redirection. Stop thinking about yourself and start thinking about your audience. This isn't just a technique. It's a philosophical shift. Public speaking isn't performance art where you're on display. It's an act of service where you're delivering something valuable to people who need it. When you frame speaking this way, everything changes. Your preparation shifts from, "How can I look good?" to, "How can I serve them?" Your delivery shifts from, "I hope they like me," to, "I hope this helps them." And your anxiety diminishes because you're no longer the point. The value you're creating is the point. Think about the last time you explained something to a friend who was genuinely confused. Maybe you were teaching them how to use a new app or describing directions to a restaurant. Were you nervous? Probably not. Because you weren't performing. You were helping. You weren't worried about judgment. You were focused on clarity. That's the mindset shift that transforms public speaking from ordeal to opportunity. You're not on trial. You're not being evaluated as a human being. You're simply a vehicle for an idea that deserves to be heard. This audience-centered approach has practical implications. When you prepare a speech, don't start with your content. Start with your audience. Who are they? What do they care about? What problems keep them up at night? What would make them grateful they spent time listening to you? Once you understand their needs, your content writes itself. You're not crafting a performance. You're solving a problem. You're answering a question they have. You're giving them a tool they can use. And when your preparation is rooted in service rather than self-protection, your confidence grows organically because you know you have something worth sharing. You know you're not wasting their time, and that knowledge is armor against fear. There's another dimension to this shift. When you focus on your audience instead of yourself, you become genuinely curious about them. You start to read the room. You notice when they're engaged and when they're confused. You adjust your pace, your examples, your energy to match what they need in that moment. This responsiveness creates connection, and connection is the ultimate antidote to fear. Because once you feel the audience is with you, once you sense they're interested rather than judgmental, the fear evaporates. You stop performing and start conversing. And conversation is something every human knows how to do. Let's talk about preparation, because this is where most people sabotage themselves. They either over-prepare or under-prepare, and both extremes create problems. Over-preparation looks like memorizing a script word for word, rehearsing until every gesture is choreographed, trying to control every variable. This approach backfires because it makes you rigid. The moment something unexpected happens, a question from the audience, a technical glitch, your mind racing ahead to the memorized line you forgot, you panic. You've built a house of cards, and any breeze knocks it down. Under preparation is the opposite trap. You tell yourself you'll wing it, that you work better under pressure, that overthinking kills spontaneity. But what actually happens is you ramble, you lose your train of thought, you forget key points, and you walk away knowing you could have done better. The audience senses your lack of structure, and their attention drifts. Under preparation isn't authenticity, it's disrespect. Disrespect for your audience's time, and disrespect for your own message. The solution is structured flexibility. You prepare a clear framework, the bones of your talk, but you leave room for spontaneity within that structure. Think of it like jazz. Jazz musicians don't improvise randomly. They improvise within a harmonic structure, a key, a rhythm. That structure gives them freedom to be creative because they know the boundaries. Your speech needs the same architecture. You need a clear opening that hooks attention. You need 2 to 5 main points that support your central message. You need transitions that guide the audience from one idea to the next. And you need a memorable conclusion that drives your message home. Within that framework, you don't script exact words. You know your ideas so well that you can express them naturally, differently each time you speak, but always with clarity. This requires a different kind of rehearsal. Instead of memorizing sentences, you rehearse concepts. You practice explaining each main point in your own words. You tell your key stories out loud until they flow. You test different openings to see which one feels most authentic. This type of preparation builds confidence without creating brittleness. You know where you're going, but you're free to adjust the journey based on what the audience needs. Here's a practical approach. Once you've outlined your talk, practice it 3 to 5 times out loud. Not in your head, out loud. Speaking engages different neural pathways than thinking. You'll discover awkward phrasing, logical gaps, and areas where your energy drops. Fix those in rehearsal, not during the real thing. Time yourself to ensure you're not running long. Record yourself if you can stomach it. Watching or listening to your own speech is uncomfortable, but it reveals habits you can't see from inside your own experience. You'll notice filler words, lack of pauses, rushed delivery. These are gifts. Now you can address them, but don't rehearse more than 5 times. After that, you're just building anxiety and overthinking. You'll start second-guessing choices that were good. You'll lose spontaneity. Trust that your preparation is sufficient. Trust that your brain will deliver when it matters. Because here's a secret. Your subconscious is far better at public speaking than your conscious mind. Your conscious mind gets nervous, monitors for threats, and overthinks. Your subconscious just communicates. When you over-rehearse, you trap yourself in conscious control. When you prepare sufficiently and then let go, you access a deeper intelligence that knows how to connect. The opening moments of any speech are the most critical, not because the audience is judging you, although they are forming impressions, but because these first 30 to 60 seconds set the tone for your own experience. If you start strong, if you feel your voice is steady and your opening lands, your confidence builds. If you stumble, if you apologize, if you start with weakness, you've made the hills steeper for yourself. Everything that follows becomes harder. So how do you engineer a strong start? First, know your opening line cold. This is the one part you might memorize word for word. Not because you need to sound polished, but because you need to bypass the mental blank that often hits when all eyes turn to you. When you know your first sentence like you know your own name, you can deliver it even in a state of high arousal. That delivery calms your nervous system. You've done the hardest part. You've started. Now you're just continuing. Second, make your opening about them, not you. Don't start with "Good morning, my name is," or "Today I want to talk to you about." These openings are weak because they're self-focused and expected. Instead, open with a question, a surprising fact, a brief story, or a bold statement that immediately engages their curiosity. For example, if you're talking about time management, you might open with, "You will never have enough time to do everything you want to do." That's not a problem to solve. It's a reality to accept. And once you accept it, you can finally start making better choices. That opening bypasses small talk and goes straight to value. The audience leans in because you've touched something real. Third, Pause before you begin. This is a power move that almost no beginner uses. When you're introduced, or when it's your turn to speak, walk to your spot. Establish your stance. Look at the audience. And pause for 2 to 3 seconds before you say anything. This feels like an eternity to you. To the audience, it signals confidence and control. It says, I'm not rushing. I'm not apologizing for taking up space. I belong here. That pause also gives you a moment to ground yourself, to feel your feet on the floor, to take a full breath. And it primes the audience to listen because silence creates anticipation. Once you've started, your early momentum carries you forward. The fear doesn't disappear, but it becomes background noise. You're engaged with your content now. You're connected with the audience. You're in the flow of communication. And that flow is where the magic happens. That's where you stop being a nervous speaker and become a messenger with something important to share. Vocal delivery is where confidence becomes audible. You can have brilliant content, but if your voice is weak, monotonous, or apologetic, your message dies in the air. And yet, vocal delivery is often the most neglected aspect of public speaking training. People assume their voice is fixed, that they sound how they sound, and there's nothing to be done about it. That assumption is expensive. Your voice is an instrument, and like any instrument, it can be trained, refined, and wielded with intention. Let's start with volume. Most nervous speakers talk too quietly. They literally diminish themselves. They hope that by being small and quiet, they'll attract less attention and judgment. But the opposite happens. When people have to strain to hear you, they disengage. They assume you don't believe in what you're saying. Confidence is audible, and it requires volume. Not shouting, not aggression, but a clear, supported voice that fills the space you're in. This doesn't come from your throat. It comes from your breath. Deep, diaphragmatic breathing provides the power for your voice. Shallow chest breathing makes you sound weak and runs out of air mid-sentence. Practice this. Stand up straight, put one hand on your belly, and breathe so deeply that your hand moves outward. That's belly breathing. That's the foundation of vocal power. When you speak, you're not letting words dribble out. You're projecting them outward with intention. You're giving each word energy. This doesn't mean you're yelling. It means you're committed. Your volume says, what I have to say matters, and I want you to hear it. That's not arrogance. That's respect for your audience and your message. Next is pace. Nervous speakers tend to rush. Words tumble out in a frantic stream because they want to get it over with. They're afraid that if they slow down, they'll lose their train of thought or the audience will get bored. But rushing has the opposite effect. It signals anxiety. It makes you harder to follow. And it robs your words of impact. Great speakers use pace strategically. They slow down for important points. They pause for emphasis. They create rhythm by varying their speed. When you slow down, especially during key moments, you give the audience time to absorb. You give yourself time to think. And you project confidence because you're not afraid of silence. Pausing is the most underused tool in public speaking. Most people are terrified of pauses because they feel like failure, like you've lost your place. But to the audience, a pause is power. It's punctuation. It's breathing room. It says, I'm so confident in what I just said that I'm going to let it land before I move on. Try this in your next conversation. Make a point. Then pause for 3 full seconds before continuing. It will feel awkward to you, but watch the other person. They'll be processing, nodding, engaged. That pause creates space for understanding. In a speech, pauses after questions, after important statements, after stories, these pauses amplify your impact exponentially. Then there's inflection, the rise and fall of your pitch. Monotone speakers, those who deliver every sentence at the same pitch and intensity, sound robotic. They drain energy from the room. Inflection is how you signal meaning. When you ask a question, your pitch rises at the end. When you make a declarative statement, it falls. When you're excited, your range expands. When you're serious, it narrows. This isn't about being theatrical. It's about being human. Your voice naturally uses inflection in conversation. You just need to allow that same expressiveness when you're speaking to a group. Record yourself and listen. Are you flattening your delivery because you're nervous? Are you letting your sentences trail off at the end, turning statements into questions? Awareness is the first step to change. Finally, eliminate filler words. So these verbal tics leak confidence. They signal uncertainty. They distract the audience. And the more nervous you are, the more they multiply. But here's the insight. Filler words aren't random. They appear when you're searching for what to say next. Your brain needs a moment, but you're afraid of silence, so you fill it with noise. The solution is simple in concept, difficult in execution. When you need a moment to think, pause instead of filling. Silence is stronger than much stronger. Train yourself to catch the filler before it comes out and replace it with a brief pause. This takes practice. Record yourself or ask a friend to count your fillers. Once you're aware of the pattern, you can interrupt it. Over time, pausing becomes natural and your speech becomes cleaner, sharper, more authoritative. Your body speaks before you do. The audience reads your posture, your gestures, your facial expressions, and makes instant judgments about your confidence and credibility. This happens unconsciously, but it's powerful, which means you can't ignore the physical dimension of public speaking. Your body either reinforces your message or contradicts it. And when there's a contradiction between your words and your body language, the audience always believes the body. Start with stance. How you stand communicates volumes. Nervous speakers often make themselves small. They cross their arms, hunch their shoulders, shift their weight from foot to foot, or hide behind a podium. All of these behaviors signal discomfort and diminish your presence. A confident stance is open, grounded, and balanced. Stand with your feet shoulder-width apart, weight evenly distributed, shoulders back but relaxed, arms at your sides or loosely in front of you. This is called a power pose. And research shows it doesn't just look confident, it makes you feel confident. Your physiology affects your psychology. When you take up space with your body, your brain interprets that as safety and power, and your anxiety decreases. Gestures should be natural and purposeful. Some speakers lock their hands together or grip the podium like it's a life raft. This looks defensive. Others flail their arms wildly, distracting from their message. The middle ground is gestures that illustrate and emphasize your points. When you talk about something big, your hands can spread wide. When you list items, you can count on your fingers. When you're making a strong point, you can bring your hand down for emphasis. These gestures should feel organic, not choreographed. The key is to free your hands. Let them move. Don't trap them in your pockets or behind your back. Your hands are part of your communication toolkit. Use them. Eye contact is perhaps the most important physical skill. It creates connection. It says, "I'm talking to you, not at you." Nervous speakers avoid eye contact. They stare at their notes, at the back wall, at the floor. This breaks the human connection that makes communication meaningful. But real eye contact can feel vulnerable, especially when you're already nervous. So here's a technique. Don't scan the audience rapidly. That looks nervous and doesn't actually connect with anyone. Instead, pick one person, make eye contact for 3 to 5 seconds, finish a thought, then move to another person. This creates the feeling of a series of one-on-one conversations rather than a performance for a faceless crowd. People feel seen, and when they feel seen, they engage more deeply. If the audience is large and you can't make individual eye contact, divide the room into sections. Look at the left section for a few moments, then the center, then the right. This ensures everyone feels included. And here's a pro tip. When you're nervous, look for friendly faces. There are always a few people who are naturally engaged, who smile, who nod. Let them be your anchors. Speaking to them will calm you and boost your energy. Avoid fixating on the person with their arms crossed or the one looking at their phone. You can't win everyone, and trying to will just increase your anxiety. Movement on stage or in the room is another tool. Static speakers can feel stiff, but random pacing looks nervous. The solution is purposeful movement. Move to signal a transition. Move to engage different parts of the audience. Move to create variety. But when you're making an important point, plant yourself and stay still. Movement emphasizes, stillness amplifies. Together, they create dynamic delivery that keeps the audience engaged and reinforces your credibility. Content is king, but structure is the kingdom. You can have transformative insights, but if they're delivered in a disorganized mess, the audience won't retain anything. They'll leave confused, unable to recall what you said or why it mattered. This is where many beginner speakers fail. They have too much to say, no clear through line, and no sense of what the audience actually needs to hear. Structuring your message isn't about dumbing it down. It's about respecting the limits of human attention and memory. Every great speech has a core message, a single idea you want burned into the audience's mind. If you try to communicate 5 equally important ideas, you'll communicate none of them effectively. So start by asking, what's the one thing I want them to remember? What's the takeaway that would make this time worthwhile? Once you've identified that core message, everything else in your speech should support it. Your stories, your examples, your data, they're all in service of that central insight. This clarity gives your speech coherence and makes it easier for the audience to follow. The classic structure is incredibly effective because it mirrors how humans process information. You open with a hook that grabs attention and introduces your topic. You preview what you're going to cover, so the audience knows the journey. You present your main points, typically 2 to 5, each developed with evidence, stories, or examples. You transition smoothly between points so the audience doesn't get lost. And you conclude by reinforcing your core message and giving the audience a clear next step. This structure isn't creativity killing. It's freedom giving. Because when your audience knows where they are in your talk, they can relax and absorb. When they're confused about structure, they spend mental energy trying to figure out what's happening instead of engaging with your ideas. Stories are the most powerful tool in your structural arsenal. Human brains are wired for narrative. We remember stories far better than we remember abstract concepts or lists of facts. When you tell a story, you transport the audience. They see the scene. They feel the emotions. They connect with the people involved. And through that connection, they internalize your message without resistance. This is why great speakers are great storytellers. They don't just explain ideas, they illustrate them through human experience. Your stories don't need to be dramatic or epic. They need to be relevant and authentic. A brief story about a mistake you made and what you learned is often more powerful than a polished success story. Vulnerability creates connection. When you share something real, something human, the audience stops seeing you as a performer and starts seeing you as a person. That shift is where trust is built, and trust is the foundation of influence. So as you structure your speech, identify places where a story can illuminate your point. Open with a story. Use stories as transitions. End with a story. Let narrative carry your content. Data and evidence have their place, but they need to be used strategically. A speech stuffed with statistics is boring and forgettable. But a well-placed statistic, introduced with context and followed by interpretation, can be incredibly persuasive. For example, instead of saying, 75% of people fear public speaking, you might say, imagine a room of 100 people. 75 of them would rather do almost anything than stand up and speak. That's not a personal failing. That's a shared human experience. And if that many people struggle with it, then overcoming it isn't about being special. It's about being willing to try. See the difference? The statistic becomes human and relatable rather than just a number. Transitions are the glue of structure. They're the sentences that tell the audience you're moving from one idea to the next. Without transitions, your speech feels choppy, like disconnected segments rather than a cohesive journey. Simple transitions work. Now that we've explored why fear happens, let's talk about how to work with it. This brings us to the second principle. These phrases are road signs. They keep the audience oriented. Don't skip them in the name of sounding more casual. Your audience needs them, especially if your content is complex. And always end strong. Your conclusion is your last chance to make an impact. Don't waste it by trailing off, saying, I guess that's it, or introducing new information. Your conclusion should return to your core message. Synthesize what you've covered, and leave the audience with something they can do or think about. A powerful conclusion often mirrors the opening, creating a satisfying sense of completion. If you opened with a question, answer it in the closing. If you opened with a story, complete the story. Give them a sense of resolution, and then stop. Don't linger. Don't apologize. Don't diminish what you just delivered. End with confidence, pause, thank them, and exit. That clean ending will ring in their minds long after you've left the stage. Handling the unexpected is where true confidence reveals itself. Because no matter how well you prepare, something will go wrong. A microphone will cut out. Someone will ask a question you don't know the answer to. You'll blank on a key point. Technology will fail. Someone in the audience will challenge you. These moments are inevitable, and they're not disasters unless you treat them as disasters. Your response to the unexpected is more important than the unexpected itself. When something goes wrong, the audience watches to see how you handle it. If you panic, apologize profusely, or fall apart, they feel uncomfortable for you. If you stay calm, acknowledge the issue with grace, and move forward, they respect you. In fact, they often connect with you more deeply because you've shown you're human. Perfection is intimidating. Graceful recovery is inspiring. So when you forget a point, you can simply say, "That thought just escaped me." But here's what's important to remember. When the microphone fails, you project your voice and keep going. When someone asks a tough question, you can say, "That's a great question. Let me think about that for a moment." Or, "I don't have a complete answer for that, but here's what I do know." Admitting you don't know something is not weakness. It's integrity. The audience doesn't expect you to be omniscient. They expect you to be honest. And when you admit the limits of your knowledge without being defensive, you build credibility. The speakers who lose credibility are the ones who fake answers, who get defensive when challenged, who can't admit they might be wrong. Confidence isn't about knowing everything. It's about being secure enough to say, "I don't know," without it threatening your sense of self-worth. Difficult audience members are another challenge. Most audiences are supportive. They want you to succeed. But occasionally, you'll encounter someone who's combative, someone who interrupts, someone who tries to hijack your talk with their own agenda. The key is to remain calm and maintain control without being dismissive or rude. You can acknowledge their point briefly, then redirect. "I appreciate that perspective. Let's discuss it more after the session so we can stay on track for everyone else." This sets a boundary without creating conflict. It shows the rest of the audience that you're in control and that you respect everyone's time. Nervousness showing through is another form of the unexpected. You plan to be calm, but suddenly your voice shakes or your hands tremble. When this happens, don't try to hide it. Don't apologize for it. Just keep going. The audience will move past it faster than you will. If it's really overwhelming, you can even name it. "I have to say, I'm a bit nervous right now, which means I really care about this topic and getting it right for you." That kind of honesty disarms the moment. It reminds everyone that speakers are human, and then you move forward with your content. The nervousness becomes a footnote, not the main story. Technical failures are opportunities to shine. When slides don't work, when the clicker dies, when the video won't play, you have a choice. You can let it derail you, or you can adapt. Great speakers can deliver without their slides because their slides are support, not the content itself. If technology fails, acknowledge it lightly. "Well, we're going old school today," and continue with your narrative. The audience will admire your flexibility and resilience. They'll remember that you were unshakable, not what went wrong. The deepest level of confidence comes not from techniques or strategies, but from a shift in identity. When you see yourself as someone who speaks, someone who shares ideas, someone who contributes value through communication, the fear doesn't disappear, but it stops controlling you. This identity shift happens gradually, through repeated exposure and through consciously rewriting the story you tell yourself about who you are. Many people carry stories from childhood. "I'm shy. I'm not good with people. I'm not a natural communicator." These stories become self-fulfilling prophecies. Every time you avoid speaking, you reinforce them. Every time you stay silent when you have something to say, you prove to yourself that the story is true. Breaking this pattern requires conscious rebellion against your own narrative. It requires you to act in ways that contradict your old identity. You speak up in a meeting even though your heart is racing. You volunteer to present even though you're terrified. And each time you do, you weaken the old story and strengthen a new one. The new story sounds like this. I'm someone who speaks even when it's uncomfortable. I'm someone who values my message more than my fear. I'm someone who grows through challenge. Notice this isn't, I'm a fearless speaker, or I'm naturally confident. Those might not feel true yet. The new story acknowledges the difficulty, but emphasizes your choice to act anyway. And that's where real power lives. Not in the absence of fear, but in action, despite fear. This identity work is supported by small wins. You don't need to deliver a TED Talk tomorrow. You start with low-stakes opportunities. Speak up in a small group. Ask a question in a meeting. Give a toast at a dinner. Each small win builds evidence that you can do this. Your brain starts to associate speaking with success rather than humiliation. And gradually, the fear response weakens. Not because you've defeated it, but because you've taught your brain that speaking isn't actually dangerous. It's challenging, but it's safe. And your brain, which is always learning, starts to relax its threat response. Mentorship and community accelerate this growth. If you're trying to improve your public speaking alone, you're fighting an uphill battle. You need feedback. You need to watch others speak. You need to practice in safe environments where the stakes are low and the support is high. Organizations like Toastmasters exist for exactly this reason. They provide structured opportunities to practice, to fail safely, to receive constructive feedback, and to watch others on the same journey. You realize you're not alone. You see people at every level, from beginners to experts, all working to improve. That normalization of the struggle is incredibly valuable. Even without formal organizations, you can create practice opportunities. Gather a small group of friends or colleagues who also want to improve. Take turns giving short presentations to each other. Make it supportive, not critical. Focus on what worked rather than what didn't. Build a culture where trying is celebrated, not just succeeding. In this kind of environment, you can experiment without the fear of judgment. You can try a new opening, test a different delivery style, practice vulnerability. These experiments teach you what works for you, not what some generic guide says should work. The journey from fearful to confident speaker isn't linear. You'll have breakthroughs where everything clicks. You'll have setbacks where you feel like you've learned nothing. That's normal. Growth happens in spirals, not straight lines. What matters is consistency. Keep speaking. Keep challenging yourself. Keep reflecting on what works and what doesn't. Over months and years, you'll look back and barely recognize the person who was once paralyzed by fear. Not because you've become someone else, but because you've become more fully yourself. The confident speaker you're becoming was always there, just buried under layers of fear and false beliefs. You're not creating confidence. You're excavating it. There's a moment that comes, often when you least expect it. You're in the middle of a presentation, and suddenly you realize you're not thinking about yourself anymore. You're not monitoring for mistakes or wondering what the audience thinks. You're just present. You're connected to your message, to your audience, to the moment itself. This is the state speakers chase, the flow state where communication becomes effortless. You can't force it, but you can create conditions for it. And the more you speak, the more often it happens. When you reach that state, even briefly, everything makes sense. You understand why people say public speaking is exhilarating. You feel the power of moving an audience, of watching understanding dawn on faces, of knowing your words created a shift in someone's thinking. That feeling is addictive in the healthiest way. It makes you want to speak again, to experience that connection again. And each time you do, you're reinforcing the new identity. You're becoming the speaker you were always capable of being. But this journey isn't just about public speaking. It's about claiming your voice in every area of life. It's about refusing to shrink, refusing to stay silent, refusing to let fear make your decisions. The skills you develop as a speaker, clarity of thought, emotional regulation, audience awareness, confident presence, these transfer to every interaction. You show up differently in conversations. You advocate for yourself more effectively. You lead with greater authority. You connect more authentically. Public speaking becomes the training ground for a more empowered way of being in the world. The most successful communicators understand something fundamental. They know that influence isn't about domination or manipulation. It's about service. It's about making complex ideas accessible. It's about inspiring people to see possibilities they hadn't considered. It's about creating moments of understanding that shift perspectives. When you approach speaking this way, the fear diminishes naturally because you're not trying to impress anyone. You're trying to help, and helping is something every human being knows how to do. You've been doing it your whole life in countless small ways. Public speaking is just helping at scale. So when you stand in front of an audience, remember this: they're not hoping you fail. They're hoping you succeed. They gave you their time, which is their most valuable resource. They're rooting for you to deliver something worthwhile. They want you to be good, because if you're good, their time was well spent. You're not adversaries. You're collaborators in the creation of meaning. They need what you have to offer, and you need them to give it purpose. This reciprocity is the heart of communication. Without an audience, your message is just thoughts in your head. Without a speaker, an audience has no new ideas to consider. You need each other. The path forward is clear. Start speaking, not someday, not when you feel ready. Now, seek out opportunities. Create them if they don't exist. Say yes to things that scare you. Volunteer for presentations. Propose ideas in meetings. Stand up at community gatherings. Each time you speak, you're building a skill that will serve you for the rest of your life. Each time you speak despite fear, you're proving to yourself that you're capable of more than you believed. And that proof, accumulated over time, becomes unshakable confidence. You'll still feel nervous before important talks. That never fully goes away, and maybe it shouldn't. That nervous energy keeps you sharp, keeps you caring, keeps you striving to do your best. But it won't paralyze you. It won't silence you. It won't steal opportunities from you. You'll have learned to channel it, to transform it, to use it as fuel. And in doing so, you'll have mastered one of the most valuable skills any human can possess: the ability to speak truth, to share insight, and to move people through the power of words. Because in the end, what separates those who influence from those who watch isn't talent or luck. It's courage. The courage to stand up when it would be easier to sit down. The courage to speak when silence would be more comfortable. The courage to risk judgment for the possibility of connection. That courage is available to you right now, in this moment. Not courage that erases fear, but courage that acts regardless. And every time you choose that courage, you become a little more of who you were meant to be. Someone with ideas worth sharing. Someone with a voice worth hearing. Someone who refuses to let fear write the story of their life. If this exploration has resonated with you, if you've felt even a spark of recognition or possibility, then you're already on the path. The next step is yours to take. It might be small, a question asked, a brief comment offered, a hand raised, or it might be bold. Signing up for that speaking opportunity you've been avoiding, proposing a presentation, stepping into a leadership role that requires you to speak. Whatever that next step is, take it. Not perfectly, not flawlessly, just courageously. Because the world needs voices like yours. Ideas that only you can articulate in the way only you can articulate them. Perspectives shaped by your unique experience. And every time you choose silence over speaking, you're depriving the world of something valuable. You're denying yourself growth. You're letting fear win. But you don't have to let fear win. You have everything you need to become the confident, compelling speaker you aspire to be. You have your authentic self, which is more interesting than any persona you could construct. You have your unique insights, forged through your experience and reflection. You have your desire to contribute, to matter, to make a difference. And now you have a framework, a way of thinking about public speaking that transforms it from performance to service, from ordeal to opportunity. The techniques, the strategies, the psychological insights, they're all tools. But the real transformation happens inside you. When you decide that your message matters more than your fear. When you choose connection over comfort. When you step into the light and speak, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Years from now, you'll look back at this moment. You'll remember when you were afraid, when speaking felt impossible, when you doubted whether you had anything worth saying. And you'll smile, not because the fear was foolish, but because you didn't let it stop you. You'll remember the first time you spoke and didn't completely fall apart. The first time you saw an audience lean in. The first time you finished a talk and thought, I did it. Those moments will mark your journey. They'll be the waypoints that prove growth is real, that transformation is possible, that fear is not destiny. And you'll be grateful, not just for the skill you developed, but for the person you became in the process. Someone who doesn't run from challenge, someone who doesn't silence themselves, someone who speaks